These are the days I live for. Nothing but total peace and quiet. It's perfect. Almost perfect anyway. They'll quiet down soon. Oh, for pity's sake! What could possibly be going on with the internet now? I think I have an idea for my next video. So, ReBoot. For those unaware, Netflix has announced yet another classic franchise they want to remake in their own image. I discussed something similar to this on my Tumblr page with the dumpster fire that was Death Note the movie, which I really need to make into a video at some point. But one topic at a time. This time, Netflix has decided to reboot... ReBoot. ReBoot was a CGI cartoon created in 1994 by the Canadian animation company Mainframe Entertainment, now known as Rainmaker Entertainment. The same company behind Transformers Beast Wars and Beast Machines, as well as, other things. It was a game changer in the world of cartoons, because it was the first fully CGI cartoon to have half-hour-long episodes. And the CGI works, considering that the setting of the story isn't in a realistic environment, but we'll talk more on that later. The series had a long run until it was ultimately cancelled after Season 4 in 2001, though plans were supposedly made in secret in hopes that the story should continue in the future. In comes Netflix, who looks at the show and says,
"You know, this show looks pretty good, but you know what's missing? Live-action segments."
Yeah, a show that was once completely CGI now has a sequel series that has most of its story take place in a live-action world. At a high school, no less. Oh, whoopee! Fans of the original series have taken up arms and have shown their disgust towards ReBoot the Guardian Code with no restraint whatsoever. So, what has inspired all this rage? Well, let's take a look at the original ReBoot series to find out. And beware, I will be talking major spoilers. So, with that in mind, let's begin. ReBoot takes place inside a computer system called Mainframe, and focuses on the heroics of the Guardian known as Bob. Yes, Bob. His key tool / digital Swiss Army knife Glitch, and his two friends, the computer sprites Dot and Enzo Matrix. Together, they not only try to ensure that their system is safe from two viruses known as Megabyte and Hexadecimal, but also from the user of the system who uploads games to Mainframe, which come in the form of giant cubes that consumes a random part of the city and holds its inhabitants hostage until the game ends. The only thing is, Bob and whoever is with him must win the games or that part of Mainframe will be destroyed, as well as the people who were inside the game. Because... reasons. This was the basic plot of the first season, which,
I suggest you. Look out! Look out! Whoa! Okay.
Yeah, I didn't edit that. Those were the first few seconds of the first episode. The first season truly shows how experimental this series was in the beginning. The writing is somewhat sporadic, the models seemed lifeless at the time, and the general tone was somewhat disjointed, ranging from comedic moments to actual life-threatening tragedies. Rainmaker Entertainment, however, used the limitations of the technology to their advantage, making simplistic models to act as background characters and cannon fodder, allowing the main characters and villains to be more recognizable by comparison until more secondary characters were needed in future seasons. Speaking of which, as time went on, the writing for the series improved to the point where future seasons were a bit more focused, especially in Season 3, but we'll get to that in a moment. From Season 2 onwards, the show began to focus on the unknown world that is the web, and the threats that can emerge from it. It got especially dark near the end of Season 2, after the twisted episode Painted Windows, where... yeah, that happened. Talk about night and day. We've come from a show with weird and wacky episodes featuring Megabyte and Bob having an all-out rock battle to this surreal nightmare fuel powered by Photoshop. And things got even more surreal when Megabyte and Hexadecimal actually won. Yeah, the bad guys won when they tricked Bob into being sent into the web before restoring order to the system after an invasion of web monsters, only to take it over for themselves. For a while, it looked like Megabyte had won until Enzo took the mantle of Guardian and actually started doing a good job of defending Mainframe, until he lost a game. Yeah, Season 3 had barely started when Enzo and his new friend, a former game sprite named Andrea, lost a game. And by all accounts, they should have been nullified, if not for their failsafe. They hid in the games. Yeah, through some technobabble brouhaha, which is undoubtedly related to Andrea being a game sprite, the kids hid in a game and became renegades. And since time flows differently in the game world, they practically grew up in the games while the outside world barely changed. This resulted in Season 3 suddenly becoming a world exploration sort of story, with Team Matrix being downloaded to random systems via the games, hoping to find Mainframe once again. On the one hand, this was a pretty cool idea, and improved graphics really helped as well. On the other, some of the episodes succumbed to what I can only describe as an early form of meme-itis. This is when a show goes out of its way to reference something relevant to the episode in question, and while sometimes it can be subtle, other times it can be a bit too blunt for my liking. That's not to say these episodes are terrible in any way, it's just that some episodes feel like they're trying too hard to parody certain source materials rather than supply a satisfying story. It's like whacking someone upside the head with a hammer and rather than explaining why, you point out that the hammer looks like Harley Quinn's. This began to change later in the season when an ominous supervirus called Damon began infecting the Guardians, and Team Matrix met with a group of computer sprite pirates, yes, those were words, who helped them escape the infected Guardians, and follow a new character called the Surfer into the web. Now things were turning into a more drama-driven, surprise-filled story arc, which only got better when the team found Bob safe and sound with new allies from the web and a new voice actor. And then they finally returned to Mainframe to help Dot fight Megabyte, which was just so awesome and I can't even... So yeah, fun season. Talk about an upgrade! This show went from a silly Saturday morning cartoon about a fictional world inside a computer to an epic adventure full of action, drama, technobabble, and a sprinkle of comedy spanning across dozens of unique worlds, featuring just as many, if not more, captivating characters both old and new. Was it perfect? Not entirely. But was it entertaining enough to make me forget that? Absolutely. Some episodes were genuine nail-biters, making me wonder how things were going to turn out. And, after probably a few of the darkest, most intense episodes of the series so far, it turned out for the best. Everything from climactic battles, Easter eggs, reunions, and one big happy ending greeted us in Season 3, bringing the show to a complete close. Except for one small itty-bitty teensy-weensy detail. Damon. Yeah, kinda weird that the plot point of a supervirus infecting the Guardians was thrown almost completely out the window right after the episode it was introduced in. I mean, sure, Mainframe was saved, Megabyte was banished to the web in a moment of karmic balance, Bob returns to defend Mainframe alongside Matrix, and even little Enzo returns due to the system not recognizing Matrix. Everything was pretty much back to normal except for that really big threat that everyone just seemed to have forgotten about. So Season 4 was an inevitability. Well, I say Season 4, but that's not really what it is. No, Season 4 came in the form of 2 movies which were eventually divided into 8 episodes, half dealing with Damon and the other half dealing with the aftermath, which we'll discuss in a moment. First and foremost, the animation has once again gone through a drastic upgrade. The shading is much better applied, the colors pop out more, and the movement of the characters is, for the most part, much smoother. Since these episodes are technically movies, this makes sense. I mean, imagine seeing a ReBoot movie with the graphics from Season 1. The characters are in top form, each dealing with their own diverse problems, as well as the main threat of Damon. There's even a few cool segments where we get to learn how Bob and the Matrix family met, and how Megabyte and Hexadecimal came to infect Mainframe. But there are a few bits I find distracting, if not annoying. First and foremost, Hexadecimal. She's a great character, don't get me wrong, I love her to bits. But since she technically became a good guy in the previous season, she had to be given a makeover, and I don't like it. There's just something unnerving about this new form of hers, and thank God it didn't last too long. My second point of contention is Damon. Again, there's nothing wrong with her. She's an ominous threat that wiped out Mainframe and the whole of the net more so than Megabyte ever did. But the voice she was given did not invoke any bit of terror. Heck, most of the time I didn't even know what she was saying. She has this quiet French accent for some reason, and it doesn't sound intimidating in the least. Oh boy, I knew this would happen eventually. It seems I've offended one of the fans of the show.
Hi. I like this show. Like, really like this show.
You don't say. So, why are you here? What have I said to offend you?
Now, I'm not offended. Just saying that you're wrong. Totally different.
Wrong about what? Oh, you're talking about Damon, aren't you?
Indeed. Damon is a virus based on the teachings like that of a cult. Typically, all viruses have a purpose, i.e. Megabyte wanting control, Hexadecimal wanting complete chaos, and in Damon's case, her wanting order.
Uh-huh. And the reason why her voice is so odd is?
She knew her purpose. She believed her purpose. Spread the word. The word is perfect. The word is everything. Like the Borg from Star Trek. Become one. She doesn't need to be over-the-top threatening. She sounded like a mother telling her child, "You poor thing. You don't understand. I'll show you what's right and what's wrong."
Huh. That actually makes sense. Alright.
So does that help clear up the confusion?
Oh yeah, thank you.
Sure. See you when we review the Dumpster Fire Guardian Code.
Well, wait a second! I didn't say anything about... Well then. Now, if this were a perfect world, Damon being inevitably defeated would have been the end of Season 4 and the series altogether. But this isn't a perfect world. Instead, we got the second story known as My Two Bobs, where a second version of Bob, which looks like the one from Seasons 1 and 2, and also has the same voice actor, appears right after Damon is dealt with. This is weird enough, but the central plot point of this movie was that Dot wanted to marry Bob, and now she doesn't know which Bob to pick. The one who helped save Mainframe but is slightly corrupted by the web and merged with his key tool Glitch, or the one who looks like the original and therefore reminds her of the good old days. On the one hand, this is a silly concept that can get tiring to hear Dot whine almost selfishly about over and over again for nearly 4 episodes. On the other, some pretty intense things happen in this story, like Bob, no, the other one. I'm gonna have to call him Glitch Bob like they did in the show, huh? Right, well, Glitch Bob tries to separate himself from Glitch and nearly deletes himself, prompting Dot to marry the other Bob. But when Glitch Bob inevitably gets better and confronts the two at their wedding, the best thing ever happens. Megabyte returns. Yeah, turns out Megabyte somehow became a shapeshifter and took on the form of Bob in order to both be rescued from the web and mess around in Mainframe again. No, seriously, that's his reasoning.
It amused me.
And now that he has both the abilities to shapeshift and hide amongst the sprites, as well as take control over them, Megabyte is even more of a threat than ever before. This would lead to an amazing, awesome finale that never happened. Yeah, right when Megabyte actually took control over Mainframe, the series was ultimately cancelled. Why? I mean, the show had gone through similar hardships before, especially in 1994 when ABC, the company who broadcasted ReBoot, were bought by Disney. Yeah, and you thought Marvel being bought by the mouse was a pain. But the show had always endured, even when the network executives tried to censor the dumbest things to make the show more kid-friendly. which ironically backfired and gave Rainmaker Entertainment plenty of ammunition for their comedic writing.
Cause we're living with BS&P. Cause we're living with BS&P. Hey, it's fun to play in a non-violent way. In a non-violent way.
So, why was it canned this time? Budget cuts. Plain and simple. You see, there were plans for a third movie and even a musical episode, but things got slashed to the point where the company could only produce 8 episodes. Heck, the 8th episode wasn't even supposed to be a cliffhanger until it was rewritten and altered against the writer's wishes. And when fans asked him about the ending that could have been, creator Gavin Blair basically said, "Nope, you ain't getting squat from me. I'm waiting for my chance to make that ending. You'll just have to wait and see." And what did all that waiting bring us? A live-action version of Code Lyoko. You've all heard the joke by now, but it bears repeating only because it's so true. 4 human kids find a supercomputer with a female AI who digitizes them into the virtual world to fight viruses who can affect the real world. Yeah, it's Code Lyoko. They even do the bit where the AI finds a way to make herself appear in the real world as a human. It's just Code Lyoko. Guardian Code? More like Guardian Code Lyoko. Look, you get the point. I may have only recently watched this show, and therefore have less investment in it than those who grew up with it, but I still respect and admire the show for what it was. An experiment gone horribly right. It had memorable characters on both sides of the battle, a fascinating concept, and an overall amazing story that evolved to a high point which everyone wishes to see a true conclusion to. The Guardian Code does not look like that conclusion at all. In fact, Michael Hefferon, the current president of Rainmaker Entertainment, went out of his way to say that when he and his company began working on the Guardian Code, they tried to imagine that ReBoot had never been made. Wow, way to go, Hefferon. Way to basically say, remember that show you all loved? It's dead now. Here's its mutilated, zombified corpse. Maybe I'm being too hard on the Guardian Code. Maybe it'll surprise us and actually have some form of connection with the original series. I mean, they still have Megabyte and he looks terrible. Or maybe the nerd rage is entirely justified and the show will be predictably bland, simple, and boring. Which would be fine on its own, but it has the name ReBoot slapped onto it. And that just makes things worse. ReBoot is one of those classic shows you don't need to change so drastically. This is why I was so infuriated with Batman and Harley Quinn. There was a promise to bring something everyone loved back, and what we got instead was not at all what we wanted. My advice, unless you really want to see what Rainmaker Entertainment has done to ReBoot, stay away from the Guardian Code and just find a way to watch the original series. I would like to take a moment to thank a dear friend of mine who recommended I watch this show, DJ QCOM, aka DJ Squirrel, host of Celestia Radio's Tree Time, an online radio show where a bunch of nerds, including myself, talk about all sorts of franchises and ideas that either inspire or enrage us. I actually did a commercial for him, which you can see on his channel right now, as well as some recorded episodes of Tree Time. I not only recommend you go check his channel out, but I also recommend that you listen to our little show every Friday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Keep in mind, at the time of this recording, Tree Time and Celestia Radio in general are currently going through some renovations, so the schedule is a little inconsistent at the moment. In the meantime, never stop rambling. This is Rambles and Mumbles of a Nerd, and I thank you very much for watching this episode. Alright, I know I said the outro, and this should be the part where the credits pop up, and la-di-da, the episode's over, and all of that stuff. But, since this episode came out a lot later than it should have, and ReBoot the Guardian Code Season 1 is already on Netflix, I figured I would at least add my unscripted thoughts at the end of this video, just so I can avoid actually making an entire video dedicated to ReBoot the Guardian Code, because honestly, that video would consist of me saying the same thing over and over and over again. Because, as I said earlier in this video, Reboot the Guardian Code is just Code Lyoko. I know that joke has been beaten into the ground so many times, and everybody says it, and honestly, it's a dead joke. But the sad thing is, that joke still has relevance. Because the plot really is the exact same thing. It's just 4 kids with stereotypical personalities going into a supercomputer with the aid of this computer AI and fighting viruses that can affect the real world somehow. It's honestly the exact same show, just live action. Watching Reboot the Guardian Code after watching the original Reboot show was just honestly very painful and very boring. It got to a point where I was just skipping over the human bits just to get to the computer bits, which, if you combined all the clips that take place in the computer world, I'm pretty sure those clips would only take up about 10 minutes, while the live action bits go on for about 20. That's probably not a very good estimation, but my point is the human bits drag on forever, while the computer bits feel like they're whizzing by way too fast. There's really nothing for me to take interest in with the human world. Like, the kids are so stereotypically bland. Like, there's the jock, there's the girl, there's the nerd, there's the guy who is going to be leader but doesn't want to be leader at first because reasons, I don't know. And they all have their own special high school kid problems, like, oh no, I need to get back to the real world in time for me to take my test, otherwise I'm off the basketball team. Like, who's the one guy who has not seen that plot point before? Every single time they build up this plot point like it's a big deal, but we all know the guy's going to make it, he's going to ace his test, and he's not going to get kicked off the basketball team. Honestly, they're just taking all of the high school stereotypes and all of the typical tropes and plot points that come with a high school environment and just cramming them in alongside the Reboot franchise. It just feels bland and unoriginal. It's just dumb. It's honestly very, very dumb. And don't get me started on Vera. Oh god. Vera was probably the worst thing about this entire show. At least at first. Because they did this thing where she, I don't know, 3D prints herself out of the virtual world for some dumb reason. And she talks as if she is a computer in the flesh, where every word ends with a period. Kinda like William Shatner. I don't know. It's just stupid, and I'm actually glad that Vera stopped doing that as the season went on. But she did a lot of dumb things to replace that quirk of hers, like the time where she downloaded emotions like Data from Star Trek The Next Generation. So one moment she's absolutely happy even when Megabyte's tearing stuff apart, and then she's angry for no reason, and it's just dumb. Oh, and speaking of Megabyte, like I said, he just looks dumb. Just dumb. Like, he looks worse than he did in the 1990s. They took away all of his color, and they gave him a rib cage, and he's not able to express anymore. They gave him these gigantic eyebrows, and yet he's not able to express himself. He looks like he's always sulking, which he probably is, considering the fact that he's in this dumb show. I will grant them this, they did get a decent sound-alike for the late Tony J. So, yay, 0.5 points for that. But then I have to take away those points because of episode 10, aka the episode where Michael Heffron gets on his hands and knees and begs us to stay because, look, we have the original Reboot assets, even though we were pretending that we never made the original Reboot show. I'm not even kidding, they got everything back, except for the background characters. They got Dot, they got Enzo, they got Frisket, they got Bob, they even got Hexadecimal, original voice actress and all. I should be happy about that, I really should, but with the new program that all of the CGI assets are being built on, everything looks so awkward and fake, and it just looks strange. And there's also this bit where this guy in the real world, who is apparently a fan of ReBoot the show, which I guess was a real thing in this universe, sees that the mainframe computer is online, even though it's not connected to his house whatsoever. And then he starts playing games on mainframe, so I guess this guy is supposed to be the user? And while it would be a cool thing to see the user in the flesh, this guy who has been unintentionally torturing mainframe with his games, the writers of the show basically turn him into the stereotypical neck-bearded nerd, which really feels like a solid middle finger to all of the original fans and just nerds in general. So yeah, ReBoot the Guardian Code just feels like an insult to all of those who have seen the original show, no matter when they have seen it. It doesn't matter when people have seen the original show. They could be me, who saw it much later than when it was originally released, or it could be the people who saw it back in the 1990s. Anyone who has seen the original ReBoot show and liked it, they are going to hate ReBoot the Guardian Code because, as I said before, it just ignores everything that happened in the original show and just waves a solid middle finger at everyone who liked it. So, yeah, those are my completely unscripted thoughts on ReBoot the Guardian Code. I am never going to make a full video on ReBoot the Guardian Code. I will not dedicate any more time to ReBoot the Guardian Code. Please don't let there be a season 2. Please. I feel depressed now.